All right, so today is, let's see, Tuesday, February 13th, the wonderful year of 2024. And I am Amanda Jones. I am our records manager for the district. I do hold a certification, which is that CRA next to my name, which is Certified Records Analyst. So today I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about FERPA. What is it? What do we need to know about it? What are our responsibilities as district administrators, etc.? So what is FERPA? FERPA just stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act that was enacted in 1974. This is a federal law that protects the privacy of student educational records. It also grants parents, guardians, or eligible students certain rights to their educational records that we hold here in the district, or that we produce, retain, all of those kind of fun words there. So a little bit to talk about what's an eligible student, right? So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the laws, the law itself, and who it covers, things like that. So when we talk about eligible students, that means it's a student that is either 18 years or older, or if they are 17 and have entered into a higher education learning, such as a college or something like that. So when we talk about rights to records, there is a point when rights transfer from a parent or guardian over to the student. So we'll talk about that as well. So again, talking about those rights under the FERPA laws. So parents and guardians and those eligible students have the right to inspect their full record that we hold here in the district. So anything that has been generated on that student, even if it's from another district, if we are retaining it as part of that educational record, the eligible student rather, or the parent or guardian does have the right to inspect that information. They have a right to a copy of it. They have a right to ask for a what's called a review of their file. So let's say we have provided a copy of the student file to a parent, and they have reviewed it, and they think that there's information in that file that they believe to be inaccurate or misleading towards their student. They have the right to ask for an amendment to their student's file. So those are some of the rights here under the FERPA. So let's say a parent has reviewed that file, and they found something that they feel is inaccurate or misleading, and they would like to request an amendment. So there's some steps that have to be taken first before that amendment is either accepted or denied. But essentially what happens is the parent will request to either the school or the district itself that they would like to amend something in the file. We, as the district, falling under the FERPA laws, are required to accommodate this request. We have 45 days to accommodate this request. And typically what happens is we will set up a meeting with parent and the principal of the school. Those two parties will review the documents together and determine whether or not the information the parent felt was inaccurate or misleading is such and requires an amendment. The school or the district does have the ability to deny the request for the amendment if they feel that the information is accurate that is portrayed in the student file. So if the school decides after they've reviewed this information with the parent or the guardian or even the eligible student, they feel that the request for the amendment is not valid, and they tell the parent, we're sorry, but we do not agree with this amendment, the parent does have the right to then take it a step further, and they have a right to a hearing. So at that point, if the parent decides they want to continue this, again, they have the right to do so. They will request a hearing. The hearing will take place, and then again, there will be a determination as far as whether or not those accommodations or changes need to be made to the record. If during that hearing that they decide the decision is made to agree with the school and the request for the change is denied, what we would need to do then as the district is create a document that would basically go over everything that the request has asked, the information that we went over with the parent, basically all those steps that we have taken, all the documentation of why we made the decision to deny the request, and that becomes part of the student file. That follows that student file anywhere it gets transferred, just showing that that has occurred and the outcome. Now, obviously, if a parent comes in, talks to the principal, they both agree that, yeah, you know what, you're right. This does seem a little misleading, or it's inaccurate information. We're happy to make those changes. We make those changes, and then we don't really have to make, there's no further steps. We make those changes and then move forward from there. So you may ask yourself, what is my responsibility as a district administrator in regards to our student records? So everyone in this district has a responsibility to ensure the privacy of all of our students' records, whether they are active or inactive students. That is our responsibility under the FERPA law and as a district who accepts federal funding. There are instances where you are going to be requested to release records. And then you may ask yourself, okay, am I allowed to proceed with this request? Should I refer this to the Records Management Department? I would say anytime that you have a request for records, that should be sent here to the Records Management Department. We take care of all of the transfer of the student files. We do have an encrypted email, so it makes things a little bit more secure on our end when we're handling that piece of the puzzle. However, there are instances where something may come up in your day at your school, something where you're going to have to ask yourself a few questions as far as your responsibility under the FERPA law. So typically the request that we get for records here in the district is to transfer a file to another school district, right? An outside school district, another school. Those types of requests are pretty much the most common. Those do not need a parental signature. We have the right to transfer records to an outside district without getting that parental signature to begin with. If a parent were to be requesting records on a student, obviously they have the right to view that student's record, and so you do have the right to release information to a parent of a student under the age of 18. Also, there may come instances where you may have, let's say, a police officer come to your school and ask for some information on one of your students. Does that person actually have the right to request these records in that space of time without getting the parental okay, essentially? The answer to that actually is no. Even though they are a police officer and they're an official to the city or wherever we're talking about, yeah, you would think that we should be complying with whatever they're needing. However, we need to refer back to our federal law, which protects the student rights or the rights to the privacy of those documents. Is there a case, though, where that police officer would be allowed those records, to view those records or a copy to those records without the parental signature? And the answer to that actually is yes. The only time that you would be able to release documents to, let's say, a police officer would be in an emergency situation, an active emergency situation. There's an active threat to the school and the police officers have been called. They are there and they need a piece of information that will help in that active emergency. that is a case where you can go ahead and release information to that police officer. But only if it is an active emergency would you want to release anything to a third party without the proper documentation. So again, talking about those eligible parties, right? So parents and guardians, parties that can prove the parentage or guardianship of a student under the age of 18. So here's another tricky piece about parentage, and pretty much there are laws based on who is the parent of this child, and a lot of times we can verify that by whomever is on their birth certificate. Those folks are the ones that have automatic rights to student files. Occasionally we will have instances where there is legal paperwork that says do not release information to this specific person. So there are definite cases where we really have to stop and think, is this okay to proceed? So anytime that you need to stop and think, you may want to go ahead and refer over to records management so we can help out. But the point of this Lunch and Learn is just so you have an understanding of the laws that do cover our information and the bit of complexity that goes along with it. Again, earlier I was talking about eligible students. Those are the students that are 18 years of age or older, or who have enrolled and entered into higher learning, such as a college. They do have access to request their own records under the age of 18 if they are going into higher learning. And those third parties with legitimate educational interest, so that's another piece to keep in mind. Does this person have a legitimate educational interest in what we are releasing? So obviously school officials, that includes our officials here in the district. If somebody does not have a legitimate educational interest to view those documents, they really should not be viewing or possess a copy. If we're transferring documents to another district, obviously they need that information to continue the student's educational career. So that is a third party with a legitimate educational interest, okay to transfer. Specified officials for audit or evaluation purposes. So the state does have the ability to come in and audit us to make sure that what we're doing with our records is under compliance with the applicable laws, both federal and state, and an audit could occur. In the event of an audit, they are allowed to view our information without parental consent. There's quite a few legitimate parties, third parties here that you can see on the list. That state and local authorities, again, that would probably be something like that police officer. But there are cases, or there are rules that we need to follow in specific cases. So going back to that question, right, is it okay to release this information? So here's kind of just a few questions that are real helpful to keep in mind. Who is requesting these records? And do they have the rights to view that record? So let's say that Susie's Aunt Carol just wants to check in on Susie and see how she's doing in school. She submits a request and says, hey, I just want to see Susie's report card. I want to make sure she's doing well. Well, I'm sorry, but that person does not have rights to the records unless they get the okay from the parent or guardian. Then we would have to apologize and let them know we were not able to release that information to them. Now, if Aunt Carol was Susie's guardian and she had documentation to show that she is the legal guardian of Susie, then absolutely we could proceed with that request. Another question to ask is, how old is the student? We're in a K-12 district, so obviously we're not going to be having to ask that question very often, especially if you're in an elementary or middle school. High schools would be the ones to ask themselves this question. And then that is their legitimate educational interest. Again, let's say that Aunt Carol is a PPS district employee. And again, she just wants to see how Susie's doing, but she's not the legal guardian. Even though she is an employee of the district, she is an administrator of records essentially, but she does not work at Susie's school. She does not have a legitimate educational interest in Susie's information. So we would have to apologize and say we're not going to be able to accommodate that request. Another big one here is, were you provided with a proper records request? Sometimes people will just come up into your school office and say, hey, I need a copy of XYZ. Well, great. I can get that for you, but I need to make sure that we have the proper request filled out to ensure that we are in compliance with all applicable laws and that we had the authorization to do so. So that one's kind of an important one there. And again, is this an emergency situation? So if it's not an emergency situation, then all of the proper steps would need to be followed in the request process. If it is an emergency situation, then we can proceed with requests depending on what the emergency situation is allowing. So there are exceptions and there are consequences. There are typically always exceptions to the rule. We don't like to say that too often just because we don't want anyone fudging the rules or the laws, mainly because if you can see down at the bottom of this slide in bold, the consequence for not following our FERPA laws, we can have our federal funding suspended if we're proven to be in non-compliance. So this, I want to really stress to you guys, if you don't take anything away from this lunch and learn except for that piece, is that there are very serious consequences for not following this federal rule. And it's something that is a kind of out of sight, out of mind to most people, and you don't quite stop to think, what are my actions or what are my consequences to my actions here, just because we in records are mainly the ones handling this type of information. So I don't necessarily expect for you to be experts on any of this. But like I say, one thing to take away from this is that we as a district can be in very serious trouble if we are found in non-compliance. So those exceptions, again, it really depends on the situation itself. And something that I've learned through my several trainings for FERPA, and a very common theme was, it depends. So even though we have these very set, structured laws, there are definite cases where we can say, well, okay, it depends, and how do we proceed from here? So if you ever have a question, any type of question, and you're not sure about something with regards to records in general, please reach out to us in records. We are happy to help. That's why we are here. Our email is records@pps.net. You're welcome to send us an email anytime. We're happy to help answer those questions. We would hope that you send us questions to ensure that we are all together keeping our district in compliance with our laws. And I also want to point out that there are differences between our federal laws and our state laws. So the FERPA law here is our federal law, and we do have other state laws that govern things like how long do we have to process a request to transfer records. So earlier in the lunch and learn here, we talked about if someone were to request an amendment to their student's file, we have 45 days to accommodate those requests. That is the federal law. So our state law says that if we receive a request to transfer records, or if a parent wants copies of records, we have 10 business days to accommodate and process those requests. Our state laws also govern our retention laws of how long we are legally bound to keep specific documents. So there are differences between our federal and our state laws. There are a lot of exceptions. There are a lot of questions. There are a lot of things that you're going to be like, I'm really not sure. So I would very much stress to everyone, it's a good idea to have a basic knowledge of what we do and the laws that govern but also to understand that you have help. You have friends in the district we are here to make sure that your job goes smoothly, make sure that our district is kept in compliance, and that we are following all applicable laws that govern our work. And that is pretty much it in a nutshell. I'd like to open this up for any questions. If anyone has any questions, comments, happy to sit back and answer any of those questions. Otherwise, you are free to go if you would like some time back in the day. Sharon.
Hi, I'm just wondering what goes into a student record.
That's a good question, Sharon. And it kind of, there's that, it depends kind of thing, but typically what we would keep are going to be things like student report cards, their transcripts. We would need things like immunization information because that's required piece of information. Their dental and vision screening, those kinds of things. We would keep discipline information. Trying to think of all this off the top of my head, so bear with me here. But essentially what we would keep is any information that is showing the progress of that student throughout their school career. That's a great question, Sharon. Thank you. Linda.
Yes, I was going to actually ask a similar question, like if parents could see discipline records and things like a 504 plan.
Yes, absolutely. So parents have the right to inspect and review and have copies of any documents, any records that we keep on their student, which does include things like 504, IEPs, discipline files, pretty much anything that we have for them.
And just a other question, what if you get a request from like somebody that doesn't speak English, like through a counselor or something? How do you handle those requests?
We don't have a specific process for any other languages at this time. I'm glad you brought that up, Linda. That's a really good question, because typically what we would do is release everything as we have it in the system, which is in English. So obviously a Spanish-speaking parent is going to be really challenged with reviewing documents that are not in their native language. So I'm assuming, I will look this up because that's a great question, Linda. Thank you. But I'm assuming that we would need to make the accommodation to allow for that parent to be able to review the information in whatever language that they know. So obviously, if they don't know English, giving them information in English would be pointless. So I'm going to look into that. I really appreciate that question, Linda.
Actually, that was even better, more than I asked for. I guess I was, if a counselor that is on the behalf of the parent, so let's say coming from somebody else, but the parent, but they're doing it because the parent can't speak English.
Oh, I understand. I understand your question. Yes, so that would be a legitimate educational need. So that counselor would be able to be kind of that person to translate that information if they were needing to. We can also contact our language services department to get involved to help us with language services there. So that would fall under that legitimate educational need.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Excellent. But I that really made me think about other problem. So because I did get a question earlier today from a community member saying that we do print report cards in both English and Spanish, but to my knowledge, we're not printing them in any other language, and they were wanting to know why. So this kind of ties into that, and I can go and do a little bit of research there. Appreciate that. Any other questions? I love it. Great question. Jennifer.
Oh, I was just going to say, for the elementary report cards, we have them, they're translated on the pps.net/report card site. So we'll have to match them up, but we're working on it. But for now, they're translated. So if somebody needed to see side by side, they can. And it's in our languages that we get everything translated in. So.
Oh, excellent. Well, I got that as a Let's Talk ticket, so it's being routed to proper channels, but it's a good question to have that information, at least if it pops up. Thanks, Jen. Any other questions I can answer? I know it was supposed to be a full hour. I apologize that I thought I was making enough slides to spread it out for longer, but I think I just kind of talked too quickly. So if you don't have any other questions, no problem. You can always email me. I'm ajones5. You can email records@pps.net. We are here to help you. Anything records related, even if it's not student records related. We also do make sure that we're keeping retention requirements for all of our district records. Sorry, Jen, thank you so much. I forgot to mention that attendance for Pepper, our attendance code is FERPA, all lowercase, FERPA. Thanks, Jen, for reminding me there. Yeah, Gina.
Yes, hi. I'm with the General Counsel's office, and I question, when do we require a release of information type of thing if it's not the parent asking? Do we always ask for a ROI?
I prefer having an ROI for everything. That ensures that we are covering our bases at all times. When we're talking ROI, though, there's a difference between an ROI that needs a parent signature and an ROI that's just like information that's being requested by an outside district. So to answer your question, though, I ask for ROIs for every request. Linda.
Oh, I forgot to ask one more question, and just kind of a silly question, I guess. But I was wondering, how far back of data do you have? Like, for example, I graduated over 35 years ago. Could I ask for a transcript?
Absolutely. Transcripts have a retention rate of 75 years after graduation date. So we retain information for quite a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And some of our documents are actually under permanent retention, such as our board minutes. Our board meeting minutes are under permanent retention. And luckily they are, because we actually did have to go back and locate something from board minutes in 1922, I believe, to prove a decision that was made between the district and the city. So it ended up helping the district greatly and saving lots of money, maintenance money for the district. So there's a reason why we keep this old dusty stuff.
Thank you, Amanda. This was very informative. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. And again, just to reiterate, if you want to go back into Pepper, mark your attendance. Our attendance code for today is FERPA. It's all lowercase, so F is in Frank, E is in elephant, R is in Robert, P is in Paul, and A is in Apple. I really appreciate everyone being here today and learning a little bit more about our federal laws. And any questions you have going forward, please refer those to Records Management. We are here to help. We're very happy to do so.